The house sat on the edge of the Connecticut landscape like a fortress made of glass and stone, imposing in its silence and beautiful in its isolation. I had seen the photographs during the interview process, but photographs never capture the weight of a place, the way the air feels heavier in certain rooms, or how the light falls differently on the floorboards depending on the time of day. When I first drove up the long gravel driveway, past the security gate and the manicured hedges that seemed to stand at attention like soldiers, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. It was not fear, exactly. It was the recognition of a challenge, the kind I had spent the last 20 years preparing myself to handle. I am 45 years old, and I have learned that most things in life are not what they appear to be on the surface. People speak in codes, actions are masked by intentions, and truth is often the first casualty of comfort. I took this job knowing the reputation that preceded it. Every nanny who had walked through those front doors in the last 3 years had quit within months. Some left in tears, some left with lawyers involved, and some simply vanished without a word of explanation. The agency had warned me, their voices dropping to a confidential whisper as if the walls of their office might hear them. They said the children were difficult. They said the father was impossible. They said the environment was toxic. But I looked at the contract. I looked at the salary that offered more security than I had known in a decade. And I looked at the photograph of the twins, Leo and Mia, who stared back at me with eyes that seemed too old for their 6 years. I saw not toxicity, but grief. I saw not impossibility, but protection. And so I packed my bags, left my small apartment in the city, and drove out to the estate to begin what I hoped would be the final chapter of my career, though I did not yet know it would become the beginning of something far more significant. My name is Felicity, and I have spent my life managing the complexities of other people's households, but never one that felt so much like a tomb disguised as a home. The first week was a study in observation. I did not try to win anyone over immediately. I knew that rushing into a dynamic like this was the mistake the others had made. They tried to force affection, they tried to impose order, and they tried to fill the silence with noise. I chose to move through the house like a shadow, present but unobtrusive, learning the rhythms of the family before attempting to change them. The father, Alexander, was a man who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, visible in the way he held his phone, in the way he checked his watch even when there was nowhere to be, in the way his eyes never fully settled on anything for more than a few seconds. He was wealthy beyond measure, a figure in the tech industry whose name appeared in headlines more often than in person, and yet in his own home, he seemed like a guest who was overstaying his welcome. He avoided the kitchen where I worked. He avoided the playroom where the twins spent their days. He existed in his study, a room on the second floor with doors that remained closed unless absolutely necessary. When we did cross paths, his greetings were clipped, professional, devoid of warmth. He treated me like a vendor, a service provider whose function was to maintain the machinery of the household so that he could focus on the machinery of his business. I did not take offense. I understood that defensiveness is often a armor worn by those who have been hurt too many times to count. I had worn similar armor myself after my divorce, after the years of misunderstanding that had eroded a marriage until there was nothing left but legal documents and silence. I knew what it looked like when a person decides that feeling nothing is safer than feeling pain. The twins, Leo and Mia, were the heart of the house, though their hearts were currently locked behind a wall of suspicion. They were identical in face, but opposite in spirit. Leo was quiet, observant, hiding behind books and puzzles, while Mia was volatile, prone to sudden outbursts of anger that echoed through the high ceilings of the mansion. They had lost their mother 2 years prior, a sudden illness that had swept through the household like a storm, leaving devastation in its wake. I had read the file, I knew the history, but knowing it on paper is different from seeing it in the way a child flinches when a door slams, or the way they hoard toys in their beds as if preparing for a siege. The previous nannies had reported that the children were manipulative, that they lied, that they were unmanageable. I watched them for 3 days before I spoke a single word of correction. I saw that they were not manipulating. They were testing. They were pushing against the boundaries to see if anyone would stay when the pushing became too hard. They were waiting for the moment I would pack my bags and leave, just like the others, so I did not leave. When Mia threw a plate across the kitchen, I did not yell. I cleaned it up. I told her calmly that we would use plastic bowls for now, and I asked her if she was hungry. When Leo hid under the table during lesson time, I did not drag him out. I sat on the floor beside him and read the book aloud, letting him listen from the shadows until he was ready to step into the light. It was a slow process, a negotiation of trust conducted in whispers and small gestures. I was not trying to be their friend. I was trying to be their constant. And slowly, imperceptibly, the atmosphere began to shift. The silence in the house became less heavy. The twins began to leave their rooms. They began to ask questions, and Alexander began to notice. He noticed because the house was running smoothly. There were no calls from the school about missed assignments. There were no incidents reported by the security team. The meals were prepared, the laundry was done, and the children were dressed and ready when his driver arrived to take them to their activities. He started lingering in the kitchen in the mornings, standing by the counter with his coffee, watching me work. He did not speak at first. He just watched. I continued to work, ignoring his gaze, focusing on the task at hand. I knew that if I tried to engage him too soon, he would retreat. I had to let him come to me. It was on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into my employment, that he finally broke the silence. He asked me about the schedule for the week. I answered him clearly, efficiently, handing him the printed itinerary without looking up from the fruit I was slicing. He took the paper, but he did not leave. He asked me how I managed to get Leo to finish his homework without a struggle. I told him the truth. I told him that I stopped treating homework like a command and started treating it like a partnership. I told him that Leo needed to feel like he had control over his own time. Alexander listened. He nodded. He did not say thank you, but he did not walk away immediately either. He stood there for a moment longer, looking at the back of my head, and I could feel the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was trying to figure out what my angle was. In his world, nothing was given without a price. Kindness was a transaction. Care was a strategy. He could not comprehend that I was doing this simply because it was the right thing to do, because I believed that children deserved stability regardless of the bank accounts of their parents. The misunderstanding began subtly, as these things often do. It started with a missing item. Alexander's late wife had left behind a collection of jewelry, pieces that were not worn but kept in a safe in his study. They were sentimental, valuable not for their carat weight, but for their history. One afternoon, the housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Gable who had been with the family for 10 years, came to me in a panic. She said that a bracelet was missing, a diamond tennis bracelet that belonged to Alexander's wife. She said she had seen it on the desk earlier, and now it was gone. The safe had not been breached. The only people who had access to the study were Alexander, Mrs. Gable, and me. I was the new variable. I was the outsider. I could feel the suspicion radiating off Mrs. Gable before she even spoke the accusation. She did not say I took it. She did not have to. Her eyes said it. Her tone said it. She suggested that perhaps I had gone into the study to dust and something had happened. I remained calm. I told her I had not entered the study that day. I told her I would help her look. We searched the room. We searched the house. We found nothing. When Alexander came home that evening, Mrs. Gable told him. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when I heard his footsteps coming down the hall. They were heavier than usual. He walked into the kitchen and stood in the doorway. He did not look at me with anger. He looked at me with disappointment. He asked me if I knew anything about the bracelet. I turned off the stove. I turned around. I looked him in the eye. I told him no. I told him I had not been in the study. I told him I would not take something that did not belong to me. He nodded. He said he understood. He said he would have security review the cameras. And then he left. But the air had changed. The trust that had been building over 3 weeks evaporated in an instant. I was no longer the competent professional who had won the children's hearts. I was the suspect. I was the nanny who might be just like the others, here for what she could take. I did not quit. That was the first thing I decided as I stood alone in the kitchen after he left. Quitting would look like guilt. Quitting would validate the suspicion. I had built too much with the twins to let a misunderstanding dismantle it. I had also begun to feel something for Alexander, a quiet respect that was bordering on something deeper, and I refused to let it end on a lie. So I decided to find the truth. I did not confront Mrs. Gable. I did not demand Alexander apologize. I simply began to observe. I watched the patterns of the house. I watched who went where. I watched the security logs when I had the chance to glance at them while setting up the family tablet. I knew that in a situation like this, the obvious answer is rarely the correct one. People do not steal openly when they know cameras are watching. People make mistakes, or people plant things. I thought about Mrs. Gable. She had been with the family for 10 years. She was loyal. But loyalty can sometimes curdle into possessiveness. She protected this house like it was her own. Maybe she felt threatened by my presence. Maybe she felt that I was getting too close to Alexander, too close to the children. Maybe she wanted me gone. It was a theory, but it was not enough. I needed evidence. I needed clarity. I spent the next 2 days operating with a heightened sense of awareness. I watched Mrs. Gable. I noticed that she spent a lot of time in the study, more than was necessary for cleaning. I noticed that she had a habit of moving things slightly when she dusted, rearranging items to her own sense of order. And then, on the 3rd day, I found it. I was in the laundry room, folding the twins' clothes, when I heard a noise from the chute that connected to the upper floors. It was a soft clatter. I went to investigate. At the bottom of the chute, wrapped in a towel that belonged to the guest room, was the bracelet. It had been dropped. It had been hidden. Someone had tried to move it out of the study without being seen, perhaps to hide it elsewhere, and had accidentally dropped it down the laundry chute. I picked it up. I held it in my hand. It was cold and heavy. I did not feel triumph. I felt sadness. This was not a crime of greed. This was a crime of fear. Someone was trying to manipulate the situation to remove me from the house. I could have taken the bracelet to Alexander immediately. I could have exposed Mrs. Gable. I could have demanded her dismissal. But I knew that would not solve the problem. It would only create more conflict. It would make Alexander feel foolish for trusting her. It would make the house feel like a battlefield. I wanted peace. I wanted resolution. I wanted to restore the trust that had been broken, not just for me, but for everyone. So I waited. I put the bracelet in my pocket. I finished my work. I put the twins to bed. I sat in the living room and waited for Alexander to come home. When he arrived, he looked tired. The stress of the missing item had weighed on him, adding to the burden he already carried. He walked into the living room and stopped when he saw me. He expected me to be gone. He expected me to have quit. Instead, I was sitting there, waiting. I stood up. I walked over to him. I did not speak immediately. I let the silence hang between us, giving him space to process my presence. Then I held out my hand. In my palm lay the bracelet. His eyes widened. He looked at me, then at the jewelry, then back at me. He asked where I found it. I told him the truth. I told him I found it in the laundry chute. I told him I did not know how it got there. I told him I did not know who put it there. I told him that I was not interested in assigning blame. I was interested in fixing the problem. I told him that the house felt unsafe when trust was broken. I told him that I wanted to work here, but I needed to know that I was trusted. I needed to know that he believed in my integrity. He took the bracelet. He held it tightly. He looked at me for a long time, and I saw the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe me. He wanted to believe that I was not a thief, but he had been burned before. He had hired people who smiled to his face and stole from his drawers. He had hired people who tried to manipulate the children to get closer to him. He was protecting himself. He was protecting his kids. I understood that. I told him that I understood his fear. I told him that I was not here to take anything from him. I told him that I was here to help him build something stable for Leo and Mia. I told him that if he did not trust me, I would leave, not because I was guilty, but because I could not work in an environment of suspicion. I would not subject the children to that tension. He did not answer me that night. He took the bracelet and went to his study. I went to my quarters. I packed a small bag just in case. I was prepared to leave. I had said my piece. I had offered him the truth. The rest was up to him. I slept poorly, listening to the sounds of the old house, the creaking of the floors, the wind against the windows. I thought about my own life. I thought about the marriage that had ended because we stopped talking, because we let assumptions replace conversations. I thought about how much pain could be avoided if people just chose clarity over anger. I thought about Alexander, alone in his study, holding a piece of jewelry that represented a ghost, trying to decide if the woman in the guest wing was a threat or a partner. I hoped he would choose wisely. I hoped he would choose trust. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. I did not know if I would still have a job by the time the eggs were cooked. I moved through the motions, cracking the shells, whisking the yolks, listening for footsteps. When Alexander came down, he was dressed for work, but he stopped at the kitchen island. He looked at me. He looked different. The hardness in his eyes had softened. He placed the bracelet on the counter. He told me that he had checked the security footage from the hallway outside the study. He told me that he had seen Mrs. Gable entering the room alone during the time the bracelet went missing. He told me that he had spoken to her. She had admitted that she wanted me gone. She had admitted that she thought I was getting too close, that she was afraid I would replace her, that she was afraid the children would love me more than they loved the memory of their mother. It was a confession born of insecurity, not malice. She loved the family, but her love had become possessive. Alexander had decided not to fire her. He had decided to give her a warning, to redefine her role, to make it clear that the household was a team, not a hierarchy of loyalty. But more importantly, he looked at me and he apologized. He said he was sorry he doubted me. He said he was sorry he let his fear dictate his actions. He said he wanted me to stay. He said the children needed me. And then, quietly, he said that he needed me too. That moment was the turning point. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a declaration of love. It was an acknowledgement of reality. It was two adults standing in a kitchen, acknowledging that they were both afraid and choosing to move forward anyway. I told him I would stay. I told him that I valued honesty above all else. I told him that if we were going to work together, we had to agree to communicate. No more secrets, no more assumptions. If something was wrong, we would talk about it. If something was missing, we would find it together. He agreed. He nodded. He drank his coffee, and then he left for work. But the atmosphere in the house had shifted permanently. The wall between us had a door in it now. It was open. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic evolved. Alexander began to spend more time at home. He began to join us for dinner. He began to ask me about my day, not just about the children's schedule. He began to share things about himself. He told me about his wife. He told me about how hard it was to raise twins alone. He told me about the pressure of his business. He let me see the vulnerability he kept hidden from the world, and I let him see mine. I told him about my divorce. I told him about why I chose this life, why I chose to care for other people's children instead of having my own. I told him that I had made peace with that choice, but that it still left a space in my heart that needed to be filled with purpose. He listened. He did not try to fix it. He just listened. And in that listening, a connection was formed. It was not immediate. It was not fiery. It was slow, like the growth of a tree, rooted in the soil of shared experience and mutual respect. The twins noticed the change before we did. They are children. They are attuned to the emotional weather of their parents. They saw that their father was smiling more. They saw that he was putting his phone away when he came through the door. They saw that he was playing with them, not just supervising them. And they saw that he and I were talking, really talking, laughing sometimes over things that were not related to work. Mia stopped throwing things. Leo started coming out from behind his books. They began to trust us both. They began to feel safe. And I realized that this was what I had been looking for, not just a job, not just a salary. I was looking for a family. I was looking for a place where I belonged. And slowly, imperceptibly, Alexander was looking for the same thing. He was looking for a partner. He was looking for someone who could stand beside him, not behind him, not in front of him, but beside him. The romance did not happen overnight. It happened in the quiet moments. It happened when he handed me a cup of tea without asking. It happened when I fixed his tie before a meeting. It happened when we sat on the porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars, talking about nothing and everything. It happened when he reached out and touched my hand, and I did not pull away. It happened when I leaned into him, and he did not stiffen. It was a reclaiming of intimacy that had been lost to grief and fear. It was a restoration of hope. There were still challenges, of course. There were days when the business demanded his attention and he was distant. There were days when the children tested our patience and we had to regroup. There were days when the memory of his wife cast a shadow over the house. But we had the tools now. We had the agreement. We had the commitment to clarity. When something went wrong, we did not hide it. We brought it into the light, we examined it, we solved it. And every time we did, the bond grew stronger. I remember one evening, about 6 months after the incident with the bracelet, we were hosting a small dinner party for some of Alexander's business associates. It was the first time we had entertained since I arrived. I was nervous. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted to show them that this house was stable, that the family was whole. During the dinner, one of the guests made a comment about the staff, a dismissive remark that implied I was just help, that I was invisible. In the past, I might have ignored it. In the past, Alexander might have ignored it to keep the peace. But this time, Alexander stopped the conversation. He looked at the guest. He corrected him. He introduced me not as the nanny, but as Felicity, the person who held the family together. He spoke about my value. He spoke about my intelligence. He spoke about my role in their lives with a pride that startled me. I looked at him across the table, and I saw the love in his eyes. It was not hidden anymore. It was not guarded. It was there, open and undeniable. The guest apologized. The dinner continued, but that moment stayed with me. It was the public affirmation of what we had built in private. It was the confirmation that I was not just an employee. I was part of the family. As the seasons changed, the house changed with them. The winter snows gave way to spring flowers. The heavy curtains were opened to let the light in. The rooms that had felt like tombs began to feel like living spaces. The twins grew taller. They grew happier. They began to talk about the future without fear. They began to ask if I would be there next year. I told them yes. I told them I was not going anywhere. And I meant it. I had found my place. Alexander and I did not rush into a label. We did not need to. We knew what we were. We were partners. We were building a life together. We were healing each other. There was a night in late spring when we walked through the garden together. The air was warm. The stars were bright. We stopped by the fountain where his wife used to sit. He looked at the water. He looked at me. He told me that he thought she would have liked me. He told me that he thought she would have been happy that he found someone to share the burden. It was the highest compliment he could have given me. It was the release of the guilt he had carried for so long. He was allowing himself to be happy. He was allowing himself to love again. And I was allowing myself to be loved. We stood there for a long time, holding hands, watching the water flow. It was a moment of perfect peace, a moment of resolution. Looking back on it now, I realized that the story was never about the bracelet. It was never about the nannies who quit. It was about the courage to stay. It was about the courage to seek truth instead of assigning blame. It was about the decision to communicate instead of retreating. If I had quit when the accusation was made, I would have lost everything. If Alexander had fired me without investigating, he would have lost the stability his children needed. We both could have lost each other, but we chose differently. We chose intelligence. We chose patience. We chose trust. And in doing so, we created something that was stronger than the grief that had tried to destroy it. We created a foundation that could withstand the pressures of life. We created a home. I often think about the women who read stories like this, the women who are looking for hope in their own relationships. I want them to know that it is possible. I want them to know that misunderstandings do not have to be the end. I want them to know that clarity is a choice. You can choose to be angry, or you can choose to understand. You can choose to leave, or you can choose to fight for the truth. It is not always easy. It requires strength. It requires vulnerability, but the reward is worth it. The reward is a love that is real, a love that is built on knowledge, not assumption, a love that can survive the storms. The house is quiet now. The twins are asleep. Alexander is in his study, but the door is open. I can hear the sound of his keyboard, the rhythm of his work. I am sitting in the living room, writing this down, reflecting on the journey. I am 45 years old. I have lived half a century. I have seen loss. I have seen pain, but I have also seen healing. I have seen restoration. And I know that this is not the end of the story. It is just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where we are not afraid. A chapter where we are not guarded. A chapter where we are whole. I stand up. I walk to the study. I knock on the door frame. Alexander looks up. He smiles. He asks me if I need something. I tell him no. I tell him I just wanted to see him. He tells me to come in. I walk over to his desk. I lean down. I kiss him on the cheek. He reaches up and touches my hand. We do not need words. We know what this means. We know what we have. We know that we have won. Not against each other, but against the darkness that tried to keep us apart. We have won the right to be happy. And as I stand there, in the warm light of the study, with the man I love and the family I have chosen, I feel a sense of peace that I have not known in a long time. It is the peace of truth. It is the peace of trust. It is the peace of knowing that no matter what happens, we will face it together. We will face it with clarity. We will face it with love. And that is enough. That is more than enough. It is everything. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in a home when everyone feels safe. It is not the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of contentment. It is the sound of breathing without anxiety. It is the sound of sleep without nightmares. When I walk through the halls now, I hear that silence. I hear the hum of the refrigerator. I hear the ticking of the clock. I hear the wind in the trees outside. And I know that this is what we fought for. This is what we built. It was not easy. There were moments when I wanted to give up. There were moments when Alexander wanted to retreat, but we held on. We held on to the belief that there was something better on the other side of the conflict. And there is. Every day I wake up and I choose this life. I choose this man, I choose these children, and every day they choose me back. It is a continuous cycle of affirmation, a continuous cycle of love. It is not perfect. Nothing human is perfect, but it is real. And in a world that is often fake, reality is the most precious thing of all. I look at the photograph on Alexander's desk. It is a new one. It is of all of us. The twins are smiling. Alexander is smiling, and I am smiling. We look like a family. We are a family. And that is the only title that matters. Not billionaire, not nanny, not employee, not boss, just family, just us, just love. I remember the day I arrived here. I remember the feeling of the gravel under my tires. I remember the hesitation in my hand as I reached for the doorbell. I was so careful then, so guarded. I thought I was coming to do a job. I thought I was coming to earn a paycheck. I did not know I was coming to find my life. I did not know that the children who needed me were the ones who would save me. I did not know that the man who scared me would be the one who healed me. Life has a way of surprising us. It has a way of leading us to the places we need to be, even when we think we are going somewhere else. I am grateful for the misunderstanding. I am grateful for the bracelet. I am grateful for the moment of doubt, because it forced us to speak. It forced us to choose, and because we chose truth, we have this. We have this peace. We have this future. And I would not trade it for anything. Not for all the money in the world. Not for all the security in the world. Because security is not about money. It is about knowing that someone has your back. It is about knowing that someone will listen when you speak. It is about knowing that someone will stay when things get hard. Alexander stays, I stay, the children stay. We are a unit. We are a team, and we are unstoppable. The sun is setting now. The light is turning gold. It is streaming through the windows of the study, casting long shadows on the floor. Alexander stands up. He stretches. He walks over to me. He puts his arm around my waist. He asks me what I want for dinner. I tell him I want something simple, something warm. He nods. He says he knows just the thing. We walk out of the study together. We walk down the hall. We pass the room where the twins are sleeping. We pause at the door. We listen to their breathing. It is steady. It is calm. We smile at each other. We continue to the kitchen. We begin to cook. We talk about the day. We talk about the weekend. We talk about the future. And as the smell of food fills the air, as the light fades into evening, I know that this is it. This is the happy ending, but it is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is the start of the rest of our lives. And I am ready. I am so ready. I have never been more ready for anything in my life. Because I know who I am, I know what I want, and I know who I am with, and that is all that matters. That is everything. Sometimes I think about the other nannies. I wonder where they are. I wonder if they found what they were looking for. I hope they did. I hope they found peace. I hope they found truth. But I know that I found it here. I found it in this house. I found it in this family, and I will protect it. I will protect it with everything I have. I will protect it with communication. I will protect it with honesty. I will protect it with love, because I know how hard it is to find. I know how easy it is to lose, and I will not let it go. I will hold on to it. I will cherish it. I will live it. Every day, every moment, every breath. This is my story. This is our story, and it is a good story. It is a story of resolution. It is a story of hope. And it is a story that I am proud to tell, proud to live, proud to share. Because if it can happen for us, it can happen for anyone. All you have to do is choose. Choose clarity, choose truth, choose love, and see where it takes you. It might take you home, it might take you to where you belong. And that is the best destination of all. The night is fully here now. The stars are out, the house is quiet, the work is done, the day is over, and we are together. Alexander pours a glass of wine. He hands it to me. We sit on the porch. We watch the darkness. We listen to the night. We do not need to speak. We know what we are thinking. We know what we are feeling. We are connected. We are one. And in this connection, there is no fear. There is no doubt. There is only us, only love, only life. And it is beautiful. It is so beautiful. I take a sip of the wine. I look at him. He looks at me. We smile. And I know. I know that everything is going to be okay, more than okay. It is going to be wonderful. It is going to be amazing. It is going to be everything we dreamed of and more, because we built it. We built it together, and nothing can tear it down. Nothing. Not misunderstanding, not fear, not the past. Nothing. We are strong, we are ready, we are here, and we are home.